Well, Josh, I gotta say, it was a pretty genius idea to use these glasses so we don't give any free sponsorships out the Fireball.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're not paying us. Why give them any clout, for sure. Well, are you ready to talk about the episode?
Yeah. Hold on, it's a bit hot in here. Let me take this jacket off.
The Enterprise was destroyed 3 hours and 19 minutes from now.
We can't escape. We can't go forward.
No.
Now, can they stop their own destruction?
I can't hold it any longer.
It's a desperate fight to escape total annihilation on Star Trek: The Next Generation.
A episode kind of about time travel, kind of about time loops. And just as a side note, we watched the film Predestination for Audience Cut. If that's not up yet, it'll be coming soon, or if it's up, check it out. And literally about the same thing, and it was the last thing we watched, totally unknown to us that this would be the next episode, so I just found that pretty hilarious.
Yeah, one of those where it's like you almost feel like you're in a time loop, where it's like,
Yeah.
no fucking way. I mean, time loops are no strangers to Star Trek. In fact, I even think they even make a reference to like, oh, what if we shoot like the ship, slingshot it around a star? Like, then Star Trek 4. But yeah, what a fascinating idea, dealing with the idea of a time loop. And I love the idea of being in a time loop and thinking, like, okay, I'm going to do something to break out of this time loop. But what if what I'm doing to think of breaking out of this time loop is part of this time loop? That idea fascinates me.
We'll stay and investigate.
Agreed.
Unless that was the mistake.
And I think this episode, nailed all those points and questions pretty well.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this episode. It's definitely one of the stronger ones of the season so far, I think. And this one is a Picard episode, which you don't get all the time because this show loves to bounce around on all the different cast and crew, which I love. But this is a Picard episode for sure, and a lot of it is focused on him having to make decisions and question himself, and am I doing the right thing? A lot of times Picard is pretty self-assured and confident in his decisions, but literally meeting a version of yourself from 6 hours in the future that seems to have failed in saving the Enterprise, which is the number one important thing to Picard, makes him start to question everything. And it's probably one of the only scenarios I can think of that I actually buy into. Oh yeah, Picard would really be questioning all of his decisions because he was just shown proof of him failing, of his Enterprise being destroyed, and that's the most important thing to him.
Yeah. It does make me think, okay, Picard's our guy, he's the captain, and this isn't like a multiverse of whatever problem. It's just a little bit in the future problem. And the fact that it's supposed to be the same guy who made this mistake.
I think it's a very interesting idea of, you think about how many times in your life you wish you could go back and do something differently. And people always say hindsight is 20/20, right? This was an example where Picard got to have hindsight while it was happening because he's seeing the future version of himself that made the wrong decision. So instead of wishing that you could go back and fix it, he got to fix it in real time by killing himself.
The cycle must end.
Stopping him from making that mistake, I think it's a very interesting theme in that way of, everyone, no matter how smart you are or good you are at your job, you make mistakes that you wish you could go back and fix, whether professional or personal in your life. What if you could see yourself 6 hours ahead and stop yourself and make that right decision? I found it very interesting.
Yeah, it's just weird that our Picard isn't the one that figured it out first on his own. It's the second, or maybe even possibly more. Who knows how long this time loop has been going on?
True.
In reality, and in my headcanon, hopefully this is only the second time. But I just find it so, because it's the same person. You know what I mean? It's not like evil Doctor Strange or something. It's it's our Picard just in the future, and the fact that our Picard failed, but it's so the entire time we've been dealing with the second Picard, it's a little bit, but although it's the same, this is the problem with time things. It's it creates a whole time loop paradox in my brain where I'm just trying to figure it out.
I find it endearing because I always talk about oh man, like everyone in Star Trek is so lucky. Everyone just lucks out and finds the answer and does everything right the first time. This is the first example of what if Picard and the people on the Enterprise failed and they all died, except because of this time loop scenario, Picard 6 hours beforehand gets to see that unfold and save it. So it was really one of the only ways we will ever see our crew fail and die, because it can't actually happen, the show would end. But it was a fun little way of seeing kind of an alternate universe of they did fail and die, but luckily there was this time anomaly, so they get to experience it and fix it.
I mean, the Enterprise is the Enterprise because of like its reputation and like your standing through Enterprise A to all the way to D. You know what I mean? It's like it's for the best of the best. The fact that Riker has turned down captain just to be a first officer on the Enterprise. So like they deal with the best of the best, the worst of the worst situations, and the fact that like an earlier version of themselves just failed. Like, and it's just so lucky happenstance it happened to be a time loop paradox. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, what if it wasn't a time loop paradox and it just died?
For me personally, I enjoy when the Enterprise and our crew is shown to be more vulnerable or more human. I don't like the idea of them just being covered in plot armor the entire time. So it's nice to be reminded.
It's different.
Oh yeah, they could fail and die at any time. Like, they're all human at the end of the day.
Yeah, true.
And similar to when we saw a couple episodes ago where they blow up the other ship, the Lantry, when they've all died and they all pay their respects as they blow it up. And in that moment, it's Picard kind of recognizing, like, yeah, this is the dangerous mission that we're on. This could be us at any time. So I personally like that about it. So that's why it endeared me to Picard here, because, yeah, at the end of the day, they're all just human. And as lucky as they are, as much plot armor as they have, whatever the case is, I would throw it same in line with, Tasha dying. Being able to kill a character off from the show. Obviously, there's behind-the-scenes reasons, but taking the show for what it is, we've had a character die. We've had being shown them failing, but then being able through a time anomaly to fix it in this episode. I enjoy that vulnerability and actually somewhat being able to believe maybe they won't make it out of this, in any given episode, even though we know they will. But
yeah. Okay. 6 hour previous Picard's timeline, because apparently his brain can't handle being 6 hours in the past. So as they near his original time, he starts to become more too. And he's still like, oh, I gotta get in the shuttlecraft. I still gotta get away. Like, what's your opinion on? Because it's supposed to be the same dude, but he still seems pretty hell bent. I gotta get in the ship.
First of all, him being so disoriented, belligerent, is mostly plot convenience. Because if that Picard came in and woke up and was fully aware, he would just explain everything. So you have to have him in this, like, unable to do anything state for most of the episode to make it work. And then once he comes to, I actually really enjoyed that scene of them interacting, although I will agree that the future Picard that we're shown is kind of like a shallow version of our Picard. Like,
yeah.
It's not totally believable.
You mean it's still you? Only you, and it's not me? You're confusing me. We're almost out of time.
It's only 6 hours in the future. There wasn't that much character development in those 6 hours. And for him to be that shallow, like, it almost makes me feel like there's something deeper within this, where it's like, I hope there is, that where this time loop paradox vortex is something more, and it planted this whole thing as, like, the fact that it disappeared, like Back to the Future style, that it was, the whole thing was a trick. Maybe.
Well, yeah, because I also find it interesting how they went out of their way to have that scene at the end where Riker approaches Picard in the conference room, and he says,
perhaps we were all part of a shared illusion.
And Picard's like, or maybe he vanished so that we can make a different decision. So it doesn't clearly spell out what's going on. And, leaving that open to interpretation, maybe for you would like it more as it was just this illusion or more psychologically affecting Picard than the real, because it doesn't really explain why did this time anomaly happen? Why did this shuttlecraft come out of nowhere and be thrown 6 hours into the past? It doesn't really explain that.
Yeah, I prefer more that it was all an illusion. You know what I mean? That's going to make me sleep better later tonight. You know what I mean?
But I think that's great that we can both watch the same episode and take a different interpretation of it that we like more. You know what I mean? And both of them make sense. I mean, we both love open interpretation stuff like that.
As much as I love the, like, okay, our heroes need to lose, per se, I love that character development. But I like that more on a personal level. But, like, the fact that, like, our characters need to lose, yes, but not lose and die. You know what I mean? And seeing them die, and, like, Picard, 6 hours in the future Picard being completely different than our Picard is like, this is a bit much.
Yeah.
Okay.
A little bit jarring, although we get to see Riker making breakfast.
Yeah! Not really overarching in the sense of the limited 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, does that 5-minute scene of them having breakfast play into anything later, really? I don't think so.
No.
But it's fun, and I love that about this show, where it's like, it's, for the most part, I mean, I don't see, season 1 has had some episodes earlier come into play later, but for the most part, this season, it's like, it's just building blocks, you know what I mean? It's like, the crew's having breakfast. It's just fun TV.
A cook is only as good as his ingredients.
I loved the reveal when Riker and Worf go into the shuttle bay, and they're like, a Federation shuttle, and then they're like, 1701D Enterprise, and like it pans up and shows the same one on the shuttle bay. Great reveal.
Yeah, I thought I was being neat and smart. It says the same number as the Enterprise, and then they say it. It's like, oh, okay, never mind. I thought I was being smart.
So I really loved that reveal. The whole episode had like a nice creepy vibe to it for most of it, and a nice kind of very subtle score in the background. A lot of these episodes have just been completely silent, not much score. And this one, they did have a nice score, and also the nice direction from Joseph Scanlan.
Commander, come here.
Captain?
All of the technical stuff here was really great, and that added to it because we don't have like an action-packed episode or something crazy. Once they bring in Picard, most of the episode is just spent trying to figure out what the hell is going on. They don't have a B story. They don't have much to do. So those nice technical touches helped with the pacing and keeping it moving.
Yeah, for sure. And that was the fun part. Just not knowing why it's happening. I mean, that was one of the best reveals, to see another Picard in the fucking ship. It's like, what? And just like figuring out like, oh, why is there another Picard there? And like coming off of Predestination, I think you and I were both like, no way. Yeah, that's the fun, you know what I mean? It's like, you don't need a B story if like the main story is that, intriguing and not giving us the answers, leaving us asking questions, not distracting us with something else. I think that's what like helped.
Dr. Pulaski surprised me in how she was like, I might have to relieve him.
I don't think that will be necessary. I hope you're right.
This is extremely stressful. It's obviously personal. We have another Picard right here. And Troy being the one to kind of stand up for him and be like, I don't think it's going to be a problem. I think he's going to be fine. And there just being that slight tension between those two without like getting into an argument or, anything like that. It was just that slight tension of we both have our different stances. But at the end of the day, Dr. Pulaski's like, it's my job as the medical officer. I'm going to relieve him if that's what I have to do. I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah, great scene. And the fact that Pulaski is a Picard mark.
Yeah.
But, the fact that she's willing to put that aside for her duty of being like, hey, ship and the crew come first.
Picard mentions Mannheim and his experiments with time, and we couldn't remember it at that moment. But he's talking about Paul Mannheim from We'll Always Have Paris, the first season episode with the woman that was his prior flame in Paris that he didn't go to meet. She's married to Paul Mannheim, the guy who's sick in the bed.
Oh!
That's what they were referencing.
Oh, okay, because that was like a time loop episode, wasn't it?
It had something to do with, there was when they were like going, it was like weird.
Is that when there was like 3 datas?
Yeah.
Oh.
And it starts off with the fencing, and it's like they do the loop in the fencing. So it was a nice little callback, and I also didn't even look that up. I just remembered between then and now. So I could still technically be wrong, but I'm not. That's who they were talking about.
Well, good for you, because you know how I am with names.
And then once the future Picard wakes up and they Really nice effects-wise, showing them walking down the hallways. They love that shot.
I love it,
And showing them talk to each other. I do agree, though, with what you were saying. It's a little bit thin and dragged out, where our current Picard just keeps asking, what's the other choice? What's the other thing to do? What did you do? And future Picard is just ignoring him, and it's like,
I gotta leave the ship.
Yeah,
I gotta leave the ship. It's
I hate that TV show cliche of, give me the answer. No, I need to wait for 45 more seconds of screen time. You know what I mean? It's like, I get why shows do it, but it was a little bit thin to me there, a little bit weak.
What was your other choice?
And I was kind of hoping for a pretty cool moment when, these two Picards, meet up and actually talk. And it ended up just not really being that great. I don't want your future.
I was gonna bring it up. Oh, God damn it! I was gonna bring up James McAvoy and Patrick Stewart in Days of Future Past, where they have that conversation with each other. That's a great scene. Like, I wish we could have that
from Days of Future Past.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
like, I wish we could have that equivalency with the Picard character. You know what I mean? I don't want your future.
One of the best trailers of all time.
Oh, the best. Yeah. Oh, the ending of that trailer with those two like face to face.
I don't want your future! We were supposed to protect them!
You're afraid. I remember.
What did you think about him killing himself with the phaser? It was unexpected.
Great reaction. You know what I mean? That's great reaction material right there. But also great, like, just episode material. Like, the cycle ends here. No time loop bullshit, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and then Chief O'Brien finally comes into the episode after not being there the whole time.
It was in the credits. We got so excited. And I remember we were like, where's Chief O'Brien at? And then he shows up like the last second, yeah.
Yeah, he comes in just to see the dead Picard. I don't even know why that had to be him. It was kind of just random.
The best part was he looked very distraught over it. Like, he was like,
yeah.
Oh my God. And then he's the one who sees it disappear. Like, he's the one they specifically chose to make the report.
The episode overall, I really enjoyed. It's
definitely
up there.
I mean, I love this episode. Super fun. I mean, the fun part about these good Star Trek episodes is discussing every little thing about it and, like, breaking it down. Like, if it was just like, oh yeah, it was fine, not much to talk about. Like, then what's the point?
Yeah,
like, I love, like, going deep in between the cracks, finding cracks if there are any, and discussing those. That's what makes this fun. You know what I mean? It's like, if it was just like, oh yeah, they saved the day. It's like, I love finding, like, wait, what about that? You know what I mean? Whatever.
And then I think that's what the show is so great at, and why it's been so fun to break down and discuss. I mean, sure, there have been some forgettable episodes, and I think you can tell in our discussions which ones those are, sometimes. Like maybe a couple episodes ago with the monsters one or whatever, the monsters on the ship, But, those episodes are going to happen too. But, yeah, I really love this one. I'm excited to see what our patrons have to say.
Oh, boy. Let's see.
This is from, I predict you guys will love this, ... Love these unrelated intros that show everyday life of the crew. Riker cooking, Data deciding to have a beard, a poker night. Yeah, 100%.
I love those. Yeah, absolutely.
It's hard when they are the whole plot of the episode, like with the poker night, but I still liked stuff about that episode as well. But yeah, Riker cooking was a highlight, even though it had literally nothing to do with this episode.
Building blocks, buddy. Just fun. You know what I mean? All right, this one's from Tyrannus fan. How do we really know which Picard shot the other and took command? Food for thought.
Well, unfortunately, we watch everything with subtitles, and it said Future Picard.
Yeah,
whenever he was talking, so we know for sure.
Yeah, true. Although there was plenty of cuts, like when they were walking down the hall. I'm like,
yeah, I mixed them up for a second.
Yeah, like, fuck, which one's the right Picard?
This one's from Guinevere. This is one of my favorites. The tension and suspense throughout this episode are simply delicious, unlike Riker's omelet.
Kudos.
Great score as well. It really enhances the eeriness. And I agree. I brought up the score there too, so I'm glad others noticed that, and it wasn't just me making something up.
Yeah. No. I mean, I consider myself a smart person, but, like, remembering score is my worst favorite. Not worst favorite, but worst trait. You know what I mean?
I want to ask you about that. When we were talking during the episode, and I was like, this has been a really good score. You're like, I'm terrible at remembering score. I'm like, well, But like, what about right now? We're watching it. Like, do you have trouble noticing the score as well as it's
No, I
happening?
can notice it, but like in like post, like talking about it, I'm trying to remember like what it sounded like. You know what I mean? I can remember faces and words. You know what I mean? But like, unless it's like
very striking.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, I've seen Oppenheimer a few times, and like, can you feel or hear the music? Is like one of the most iconic scores ever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just, it's tough with TV. All right, this one's from Blargan. I've never cared much for this episode. It's like it should have been longer with more deep substance, but ended up just dipping it in enough to make it to interest you without actually making it filling at the end, like drinking water with a lemon in it.
Well, that's an awesome analogy.
that is a great analogy, yeah.
What was his name?
Blargan.
Oh, here it is. Okay. I mean, I don't agree necessarily, but I can understand if you are looking at it from the time travel element or wanting to know more about that. I would understand.
Yeah, in terms of just like barely dipping in and not giving you much info to like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because I was at one point in the episode thinking like, I think there's more to the story that we haven't known yet, and it turns out not really. Like, it doesn't tell you everything up front, but there's not much to it. There's not some huge crazy twist. It's just kind of like, it is what it is, to the point where you even more so think it's an illusion than, because there's just not much to it there.
Yeah, it's like they just came across this horrible thing. Like, let's fuck with this, you know, thing.
Well, on that note, I gotta read this one. This is from Andreas. What can I say? This is the worst episode of the series, in my opinion. Yes, worse than Code of Honor. Absolutely everybody is acting out of character. The plot is idiotic and boring. Boo. Are you trolling to try to get your takes right, Andres? No, I mean, God, I love to see it. I love to see the different opinions, and I love to see people in this same thread saying it's one of their favorite episodes, and then people saying it's their least favorite episode.
That's what's so fascinating about these. You know, when everyone has, not hive mind, but when everyone has the same feelings about an episode, it's like, oh, okay. But when it's that, like, when people say they love it or hate it, it's like, that's fascinating, in my opinion. It's like, really? Like, the worst episode of the season? And other people are like, oh yeah, I love this episode. It's like, I love how the human brain works in everyone. You know, like how each person retains this information and like has their own opinion on it. It's like, how could you look at this and say like it's your favorite or it's the worst, while looking at the same thing? Like, that's so fascinating.
This one is from James. I enjoy the episode, but the time travel feels not well thought out. Why does the Enterprise get destroyed, but not when they turn around? If it doesn't want Picard to leave, then why does it attack him? Since it's the duplicate Picard and the duplicate shuttle who decides to leave, they have no origin, creating a paradox. Well, Alex, what do I always say about time travel? Don't think about it.
In fact, I think, isn't there, was it Austin Powers?
Yeah, where they make fun of it.
Yeah, it's like, don't think about it. You know, it doesn't fucking matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah, time travel is I've said this dating all the way back to TOS and other stuff we watched. Time travel is my one ultimate pass. As soon as something brings up time travel, I'll listen to your rules and I welcome them if you want to explain it to me. But I'm not going to hold you to that because no one ever does it perfectly. Even Predestination, which I think is one of my favorite examples of it, when you really start to think about it, you're left with more questions than answers. Just don't think about it.
Yeah, like, absolutely, explain your rules. But it's like, it doesn't matter when you, like, it's fucking made up. You know what I mean? It's like, you know what I mean? It's like, whoa, wait a second. It's like, okay, you introduce time travel, explain your rules. I'll work in the parameters of your, if you break the parameters of your own rules that you explained, okay, maybe I'll be like, wait a second. But it's like, if it's in your rules, fine. You want, whatever.
Yeah, and I understand this sounds hypocritical from two people who break down and dissect everything, but for me, it's just my one pass. Just time travel. It's just, that's my one. I'm not going to critique it on how well it does time travel. Or although I'll admit there are some better examples than others, but yeah, it is what it is.